For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Evelyn, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Their power feels like mine. A dog sled racer says goodbye to her pack. After years of racing, I wanted to take my sled dogs back into the wilderness. By Blair Braverman. Blair Braverman has completed some of the most difficult dog sled races in the world, including the Iditarod and the Kobuk 44. Mushing blurs what it means to be wild. One night, my sled dogs and I were gliding through a birch forest in Wisconsin when a black wolf emerged from the trees and ran beside us. None of the dogs even barked. They treated him as a peer, which unnerved me. The eye contact they made. If my dogs related to the wolf and I to them, then what did that make me? Another time, in Saskatchewan, a wolf followed us for 100 miles. I never saw it move, but each time I turned around, it stood in the trail with its chin high. We were 11 of us then, crossing a chain of frozen lakes, and wind blew hard across the ice. The trail was blown smooth. Sometimes the dogs stepped off its edges and stumbled neck deep in the fluff, or my sled caught the lip and flipped onto its side. It was cold, 30 below zero, and the wind made it colder. My legs grew numb below the knees, and the dog's fur lifted in waves. At night the aurora cast a pearly, shifting glow over the landscape. I turned sometimes, looked back, and sure enough there was the wolf, always standing watching at the edge of my headlamp's beam. It was chasing our crumbs, I think. I gave each dog a frozen chicken thigh every hour, and when they chewed, they left chips of meat in the snow. I fell in love with mushing almost 2 decades ago when I was 18. I wanted to run expeditions, mushing long distances on our own, camping out in the snow. It's an ancient way to cross the north, and it feels ancient, a way of stepping into timelessness for as long as the trip lasts. Still, the sport has evolved. 100 years ago, trappers and mail carriers traversed ungroomed routes with well-muscled dogs, and hunters hauled seals and walruses home by sled. It wasn't until the rise of long-distance racing in the 1970s, an effort to revive sled dog culture after snowmobiles made subsistence mushing obsolete, that dog teams grew longer and the dogs lighter and faster. These days, most sled dogs are Alaskan Huskies, a fancy name for northern breed mutts with a yearning to pull and a dash of hound for speed. I never intended to race, but a musher I worked for was racing anyway, and he lent me his extra team. Later, when my husband learned to mush and we got our own dogs, he liked planning for races, making measurable goals, and he encouraged me to compete. I won a 2-day race against 20-odd teams in my second season and peaked in the top 5 in 2 major marathons. The 300-mile Canadian Challenge that year was a 40-below ordeal that half my competitors didn't complete, and the infamous Kobuk, which crosses 440 miles of wind-pummeled Arctic terrain. I wasn't a natural racer. I sought adventure more than speed. But I had 2 main strengths. Like the dogs, I didn't quit, and I was efficient at checkpoints, those camps or villages en route where teams can rest and resupply. I could churn through tasks, making straw beds for the dogs, taking off their booties, lighting the methanol cooker, melting snow, thawing meat, doling out stew, tucking the dogs under blankets, massaging their muscles, then repeating those steps in reverse, with little or no sleep myself, before mushing another 40 miles down the trail and doing it all again and again. Checkpoints are where most mushers lose time, even if their dogs are fast. The sleeping bag's too enticing, and the booty's ice-crusted Velcro gets stuck to itself when your hands are fumbling cold. For a while, my racing career, like a dog sled, went only one direction. I entered longer events each season. 7 years back, I lived in a dry cabin in Alaska, 60 miles from the nearest neighbor or road, and finished the 1,000-mile Iditarod, a colossal journey over the Alaska Range, up the frozen Yukon River, and across ice on the Bering Sea. On my first try, when the dogs and I reached trail's end in the tiny city of Nome, the bustling world was too much. I wanted to turn around and where they and I could be alone. Winters passed. My race dogs grew old, as dogs do, as people do, and retired one by one to gentler lifestyles. Adventurers more than speed. Their pups and grandpups, passionate and green, took their places on the line. And then last spring, at the end of the season, my husband and I separated. We'd been through fire, running successive Iditarods, spending New Year's in a one-room cabin with no plumbing and 30 dogs, training the race team, a Herculean task together. In losing him, losing the witness to my life, I felt our years together becoming less real, flattened into one human memory instead of two. That's the thing about divorce. You're losing not just the future you pictured, but also the past as you know it. Now he has most of the dogs. After an all-consuming decade, my racing career crashed suddenly to a stop. So I began this past winter with a vision, to gather my still-living retirees and return to the wilderness together. They're old, so we wouldn't go far, just a 2-day trip at the top of Minnesota. As I and they faced retirement from racing, I hoped they would teach me how to move on. I hoped they knew that we would always be a team. So many times in the hardest moments, I've wished Pepe could lead my life as she does the team. Pressed my face into her neck, begged, "What do I do?" She never answers. She just sits straighter and looks away. As a lead dog running in front of the others, Pepe's job is to guide the team. Where she goes, the other dogs follow, and eventually I, swinging behind them on a sled with no steering and only a metal claw that scrapes snow as a suggestion of a brake, follow too. A musher is like a water skier behind a boat, making requests he cannot possibly enforce. For this reason, the relationship between musher and lead dog is intimate and intense. Each time I call directions to Pepe, gee and haw for right and left, or on by, or straight ahead, or whoa, it's with the understanding that she will comply only if she agrees, and she will agree only to the extent that she regards me as competent and useful. I prove my use by learning and anticipating her needs. I lose credibility by doing silly things like crying into the fur of her neck. Emotion embarrasses Pepe. She is stoic and rarely wags. When she expresses excitement, it's generally for work alone. I have a recurring insecurity that she doesn't like me very much. Who could blame her? She's cooler than I'll ever be. I can't count the storms she has led me through, glancing back with a look of simultaneous exasperation and pride before veering hard down some unmarked trail that happens, of course, to be a shortcut home. In the Kobuk, on sea ice, she muscled through a ground blizzard as the wind whipped fallen snow into a blinding haze. At the finish line, a former Iditarod champion asked to buy her for $5,000 on the spot. After that race, the other dogs and I rode in a snowmobile trailer around Kotzebue, a village in Alaska. Pepe, who had just run 440 miles in 3 days, refused to ride with us. Instead, she kept pace miraculously with the machine, white paws swinging in an impossibly fast trot, ears flapping and eyes half closed against the ice wind. Pepe hasn't officially retired at almost 13. Her body has slowed, but she still trained with my ex for much of the winter, joining every run she could. But she will naturally be leading this trip along with 6 of her old peers. Colbert, the eldest, came from champion lines, sold from team to team until a friend offered him to me free. And though I wasn't looking for a dog, I saw his shaggy face and fell in love. He had a low top speed, falling back when lighter dogs broke into a lope. but he was always first to his feet, barking to run no matter how short the break. And man, can he eat! An asset for sled dogs who, despite marathon workouts that burn more than 10,000 calories at a time, don't always care for food. Pepe unnervingly takes hunger strikes that last for days. Once, 900 miles into a race, I woke from a nap to find Colbert grinning stupidly and discovered that he'd sneaked into my sled and eaten 10 pounds of frozen chicken skin while I slept. We put him on a bush plane to the finish line because he was too full to run. Spike and Clem are littermates, brothers, sons of Pepe, both 9. They're handsome to a fault, square-jawed, and robust. Clem tumbled through puppyhood, slow and round, and found his athleticism with age. He has an unshakable good cheer and an obsession with scratches on the rump. Spike was the beast of the day, a jock from day one. He never waited for milk. He simply plowed through his siblings, knocking them aside. Now he lows like a cow at small discomforts, like when I work a burr from his fur. Spike and Clem, though they've chilled with age, were cutthroat nemesis for years. I ran their sister Willow between them to keep the peace. Willow is plain brown, big for a girl, with a kind of wide-eyed innocence that makes you forget how good she is at raiding your pocket for snacks. She loves breaking trail through powder and is, like her brothers, a cuddler. She'll ram her head right into your chest. Her daughter Dora is the youngest here and still races sometimes, but at 7, middle-aged, she's lost the freneticism of her youth. She's brilliant, desperate to please, but used to be too energetic to sit or stay on command. For her first 3 years, every picture I took of her was blurred. When Dora was spayed and needed rest to heal, I put her in a bunk in the dog truck because she liked it more than a crate. An hour later, she'd nod out, her head stuck through the truck's wall with a maniacal smile. Even being spayed couldn't stop her. Years later, she gave birth to 2 puppies anyway, which seemed like a very Dora thing to do. Boudica, 11, is Pepe's half-sister and a lead dog herself. She gives creepy, endearing kisses. She pushes her snout into your eyeball, then extends the warm tip of her tongue. Years ago, Boudica was attacked by another dog, and when I couldn't pull them apart, I threw my body over hers to shield her, felt her trembling beneath me, the other snarling above. This desperate move plus emergency treatment helped Boudica pull through. Later that year, a Jack Russell bit me in the face. He had jumped at my dinner plate, and I, accustomed to sled dogs, growled to warn him away. That doesn't work with terriers. Another musher gave me 9 stitches in the mouth by headlamp. Boudica and I recuperated together. We both still have the scars. I'd wake at night to find her forehead pressed on mine. For this reunion trip, I'm mushing from Chili Dogs, a retirement kennel for racing and sled dogs in Ely, Minnesota, that is run by my friend Jake Way, his wife Jess, and their 4 ultra-competent kids. It's where many of my older dogs now live. The kennel's concept is simple. When sled dogs slow down at 8 or 9 or 11, they can get discouraged. They feel bad about not keeping up with their friends. Then they come to Chili Dogs, where they're the youngest and get a new lease on life, pulling tourists at their own pace and teaching scouts how to mush in the nearby Boundary Waters Canoe Area wilderness. The place is cacophonous, a sea of play, wrestling, and wagging tails. But I try to stay focused, packing my sled with gear and straw and meat. It feels good to gather the team. Pepe scouts the trail while I prep Colbert, pulling the harness snug on his thick chest. Clem pushes his head against my cheek. When the dogs are hooked up, they jump and wail, desperate to start the run. I grip the sled hard and untie the rope that holds them back. Then the dogs surge, and the sled yanks me forward. and we're flowing down a narrow trail through ice-glazed aspen and black spruce. There's the sound of breath, the hiss of the runners, the sled rattling slightly over bumps. It's just afternoon, but we're north, so the sun hangs low. The trees cast blue stripes on the golden shore. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I always get a rush of adrenaline at the start of a run. It's the shift in control from myself to the dogs, the fact that they're stronger than I am and we're entering wilderness, and my influence on the trip's outcome is largely determined by their grace. But this time, my nerves dissolve fast. I know them so well, Spike's fur poking up through his harness, Boudica's bouncing right ear, that being a team tied together and moving fast is like returning into my own body. I feel their movements through the sled, passing into my fingers, my feet. New mushers are shocked, always, by a dog team's power. This power feels like mine. Colbert is slack, his tug line bouncing behind him, and I ride the sled brake with one heel, slowing the team to his pace. Normally dogs don't wag while they run, they're too focused, but his tail half lifts, scraggly tip circling anyway. Including him means we can't run far, maybe 5 miles instead of 30, which is itself much shorter than the 100-mile days these dogs ran at their peak. But I can't leave him, not when he wants to come. How many hours have I watched that shaggy back lope up the trail? How many hours do I have left? In lead, Pepe and her granddaughter Dora set the pace in unison, a perfect copy-paste. They're both dark gray, catching the light, and though I know their gaits, their tails, the rhythm of their ears, who slows down to bite snow, who's prone to looking back, who wants to flirt with passing teams, whose fur gets stickier with frost, I think, watching grandmother and granddaughter together, that if it weren't for the stripe of white on Pepe's head, flashing up as she bounds, I wouldn't be certain who was who. Now Pepe glances down to the right, and I see shadows in the snow ahead, wolf tracks crossing the trail before forking to the left. Her gait doesn't change, but her eyes follow, and she turns her chin to the side. I graze my foot on the brake, sending a minuscule twang through the line. Pepe's head snaps forward. She thought of chasing the tracks, now she won't. The rest of the dogs don't even know. But there are more spoor ahead. 3, 4, and soon the others notice too. Spike's gait, normally so smooth, jolts as he sniffs the snow. Clem spurs from a trot to a run. The wolves were just here. Jake snowmobiled the trail this morning. The prints cross over his tracks. The smell of wolves excites the dogs. They want to run faster, but Colbert is getting tired. He lumbers even as I ride the brake, and too quickly the miles pass. We reach a bog, crusted white, with dry grass and cattails poking through the snow. To the east, a small hill covered with alder and pine. Sled dogs, even old ones, hate to stop. Colbert patters his feet when I call. Whoa! I tie the sled to a tamarack so they don't take off without me and start to unload. The rituals of making camp are soothing, especially today. It's unseasonably warm, 30 degrees. My hands are bare and my parka's in the sled, along with mittens I stitched from the fur of 2 beavers that these dogs once ate. I cut the twine on a straw bale, pulling apart the dusty flakes, and shake them into 7 mounds. 6 dogs rearrange the beds, nosing and turning until the straw feels right. Pepe ignores her mound and makes for the rest of the bale, which she occupies like a throne. The cattails are damp, poor tinder, so I shred birch bark into fluff and light it with a match. Willow rests her paw on my thigh as I kneel to feed the flame. Spike licks my chin with his massive tongue. Finally, the fire crackles and orange feathers wrap the logs. I melt snow in a kettle, propping it on the burning wood, and duck when the smoke spins toward me. Once the water bubbles, I add it to beef and kibble, then dole out dishes to the dogs. Colbert's done eating before the others even start. He licks his lips and eyes their steaming bowls. Pepe dumps her meat on the snow, uninterested. For a time, we curl up together, watching the sky turn pink. The fire grows low and the air colder. One by one, the dogs sink into sleep. Everyone but Pepe. At first, I think she's guarding her meat, standing at the edge of the camp's packed snow, half facing the darkness. I call, patting the straw beside me, but she looks away. Why won't she come near me, and why guard her food when the others are asleep? I wish she'd come over, let me pet her. She's just so damn cool. Pepe, I say, but she doesn't respond. Her chin sinks, and for a moment she bows and stumbles before shaking her head to wake up, as sleepy as I've ever seen her, but she won't lie down. Then a twig cracks and she meets my eyes. It's okay, I say. Her ears twitch. It was just a bird. Pepe licks her nose. She stares at me a moment longer, then turns back to the night. Her head sinks again lower, and she snaps it back up. And suddenly I understand. Pepe's not avoiding me. She's working with me. I'm sitting up, so she's sitting up. We're guarding our team together. I've never been good at letting go. Look at the dogs now. Sprawled content, shrouded in frost and breath, and sorrow is punching me in the ribs. I can't bear the thought that it won't last. Dogs' lives pass faster than ours. I've watched them, loved them, for generations. Willow, Pepe's daughter, had her own puppies 7 years back. When her labor came, I sat nearby as ripples passed through her fur like waves. Her eyes were closed, eventually like a burp, but slid her first. He was huge, round-bellied, brown fur, pebble ears, one dab of a white paw. For a second I saw him grown, tall and beaver brown, white paws prancing in the snow. Then Willow licked him and his head fell back. He was steaming warm and dead. Willow pressed her tongue to his face, bracing him with her paw, and pushed him to her belly to drink. He flopped over. She licked harder, frantic. Finally, she lifted him with her mouth, arching her neck. In one moment, she opened her throat and swallowed her baby whole. I could barely breathe. I didn't know what to do. Willow sighed and lay back down. New pulses passed through her. She straightened her tail, and another puppy slid out, gummy with slime. Small this time, black and white. This puppy was dead too. No, I said, though I didn't mean to speak. The word just appeared in my voice, not another dead pup. I wouldn't allow it. I took the puppy from Willow before she could lick it and lifted it to my face. A limp girl, her markings uneven as if she'd been dipped in paint. No breath, no heartbeat at all. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did it anyway. With those tiny ribs in my hands, her skin-like membrane, I pumped her chest with the flesh of my palms, squeezing fast and tight. I covered her snout with my mouth and blew, kept squeezing, blowing, until the puppy coughed. Then I thrust her to Willow's side, where she nursed as Willow gave birth to 8 more pups, every one of them alive. The next morning, they were all bigger, except for the black and white girl, who had shrunk. I held her to Willow's nipple, but she wouldn't drink. I offered formula in a syringe. It dribbled from her mouth. I warmed her under my shirt, but she stayed cool. In 3 days, she died again, and that time she didn't come back. I've thought of that puppy a lot, wondering if it was right to revive her, if there was cruelty in my refusal to let her go. We both had our ways of facing grief, Willow and I, and maybe Willow knew best, keeping her boy inside her, where he belonged. We wake up, surrounded by wolves. It's 2 a.m., I think, although I'm not sure, because I've been fast asleep, burrowed deep in my sleeping bag to escape the cold. But suddenly at once, every dog rises, facing the darkness to the east, and by the time I hear a strange bark and answering howls, every hair on my body has already prickled up. The dogs don't growl, but they're vigilant, ears perked, teeth glinting as the sides of their lips curl. I find my headlamp, cut a beam through the trees. All I see are snow and grass and the steam of our breath swirling white. The sounds come again. 2 barks, 2 howls, so close that I count the dogs, 7 heads, to see if we've added more. Wolves kill and eat dogs, but I've never heard of them attacking a sled dog team. That said, I've never encountered a pack this close. I reach for Spike by my side and flatten his hackles with my palm. They stay up. His fur is crusted in ice. Colbert lifts his face to the sky. At first I think he's smelling the air, but a coarse howl rises through him. Boudica joins with a wail, and a second later Dora does too. Wavering cries, short and shrill, her white cheeks rippling in the lamplight. The other dogs' voices layer on, one by one. Their song is short and stops abruptly. They lift their ears and listen hard. Silence, just the crackle of our movements in the cold. The closest wolf barks back. This time, though, the mood has changed. Their pack surrounds us. Whether they're drawn to our food or circling the intruders, I can only guess. But our pack has responded in one voice, answering their questions or their call. With a grunt, Pepe lies on the straw. If Pepe's not scared, then the rest of us aren't either. Willow's ears drop. Boudica paws at the snow. Spike snuffles his whiskers on my face, and I rub his cheek with my thumb. Colbert poops. The wolves, so close, are our acquaintances now. The closest one barks and barks. We sleep to the serenade. At sunrise, the wolves are gone. The dogs curl in tight balls, asleep in a row, and the frost on their fur glitters when they breathe. Mornings on the trail are always an exercise in will. Unzipping the sleeping bag, letting in air, stepping into frozen boots, and this moment is particularly difficult to break. I could lie here happily for a week or more, but after a while Colbert lifts his head and notices I'm awake. His tail thumps, rousing Willow, and he makes a sound in his throat about wanting breakfast, so high-pitched that it's hard to hear. He's not whining, he's just letting me know. If we were racing, we'd be 80 miles away. Where are the wolves, the other pack now, slipped deeper into the trees as we're ready to emerge. I start the fire and heat food, beef for the dogs, oatmeal and cocoa for me. Clem backs up for a butt scratch. Spike puts his head on my lap. Dora gnaws my leather knife sheath, and when I take it away, she flops dramatically on the ground. Colbert seems perkier than yesterday. Maybe his muscles have loosened, or he's excited about flirting with Willow, who paws at his back with a spark in her eye. He pees on his bowl and sneezes, making his ears bounce. When we get back to Jake's, I'll refer to these dogs as mine, and then correct myself. Your dogs, I mean, or both of ours, and Jake will correct me back. They're their own dogs, he'll say. We're just the people who get to love them. Peppy's restless. She circles the camp, plunging into snowbanks and popping out covered in snow. She keeps looking back at me. Peppy, I say, and the name releases her. She launches down the trail. She knows what I'm suggesting. She's been waiting for it too. She finds the wolf tracks, 4 or 5 sets headed in different directions. One turns right and she veers as sharply as if I'd called Guy and bounds after it into the snow. Off trail, the tracks change. They're in clumps, 5 or 6 feet apart. The wolf was bounding just like us. We follow it uphill through clumps of red pine until the snow thins around rocks. Pepe stops it in packed snow at the top of a shallow bluff. She's found the place where it stood, and right below, through the trees, is our camp. How long was it here before we realized? An hour all day? watching us, reporting on us back to its pack. I can smell the smoke from the fire. The wolf could smell that and the rest too. The straw, ground beef, dregs of cocoa, worn harnesses, beaver fur mittens, each dog's particular scent. The trees are thick, but through the branches I see a flash of yellow. Spike. Colbert wagging. Dora's white mask when she moves. I want to call their names so they know I'm here. I want to guard them in secret forever. Pepe steps closer, brushing against my leg, and I rest my hand on her neck. She stares at the others, ears tucked, and the intensity of her gaze tells me that I'm not the only one who doesn't like to let go. Blair Braverman is the author of the memoir Welcome to the Goddamn Ice Cube, the children's book The Day Leap Soared, and the novel Small Game. Jasper Doach is a Dutch photographer and a longtime contributor to National Geographic. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I taught my son everything except how to take a vacation. He was about to leave for college when I realized I had never taken him on a real vacation. By Taffy Brodesser Ackner. Taffy Brodesser Ackner took a cab, 2 airplanes, then another taxi, then one ferry, then one more taxi, then the same thing back again, and did that whole thing twice in order to courageously report this urgent story on her inability to vacation. So what do we have to do? Ezra asked. We had finally arrived at the villa we rented at an oceanfront hotel on Elbow Cay in the Bahamas. We dropped our bags on the tile floor, and Ezra threw himself down on the floral print couch in the entryway. A golf cart, the primary means of navigating the island, awaited us outside. Well, what do you want to do? I asked. We could see if the pool at our hotel seemed friendly. We could order a frozen drink at the bar, which had 6 or 7 people crowded around it at this pre-dinner hour, especially because at 18 he was the drinking age in the Bahamas. Or what if we just went to the dock and watched the sun go down, or simply watched the ocean striped in different shades of turquoise owing to the brighter sky and the shallow depths and the white sand beneath it, not to mention the relative absence of the plankton that turns other parts of the ocean darker. He blinked. He wasn't sure what I was talking about. But isn't there something we have to do? He asked. There was less dread in his voice than I might be making it out to sound. At 18, Ezra is a creature of acceptance and fortitude. His confusion was hard-earned. Ezra has been on a lot of what we used to call vacations, but as he got older he came to realize they were actually my work trips he was tagging along on. My husband and I didn't have any money when I was starting out as a magazine freelancer, and so paying the relatively more nominal price to bring my children along on far-flung reporting trips seemed like the only way they would ever get to see the world. Work trips are how Ezra returned to Los Angeles, where he was born, many times, and visited a bunch of other American cities too. He has been to Rome with me, hustling down roads and running through museums in the after-hours margins of whatever story I was there to report. My youngest son, Haskell, has been with me to Israel for a food story, traveling alongside me to the Lebanon border to tell the story of a chef in exile. Haskell napped in a room off the kitchen where I did my interviews. My children have been dragged around the globe in the name of my work, and therefore the trips sort of look the same. Arrival, me saying something about how lucky we were to be there, a hotel restaurant, being propped up with my phone at a neighboring table while I interviewed someone or talked urgently to my editor. But still we were traveling. What more could a person want for her family? I wanted time with my children, and I wanted time to work. It didn't seem to me that I could cobble together anything resembling the life I wanted for us all if I wasn't constantly doing both at once. Now it was our last winter together before Ezra left for college, before he became independent and realized that his captivity to me would now be optional. He was now a fully formed person, having been the eager recipient of all I had to teach him in his life. And I'd done my job. I taught him. I taught him how to crawl, how to walk, how to run. I taught him how to talk and the right etiquette for seeing a movie. Hat off, phone on, do not disturb. I taught him how to fly standby and what the sacrifices of choosing a bulkhead seat were. I taught him that you should never recline your chair unless the person in front of you did. Hurt people, and that the person in the middle seat should get to use both armrests. I taught him that the peanut M&Ms at the minibar are too expensive, but that the hotel breakfast is almost always worth it, unless it's continental, which means it's terrible and you're better off getting something en route to the airport. I taught him to assess a security line for possible delays. Strollers, recalcitrants who are already complaining about taking their iPads out of their cases in Donald Trump's America, or having to take off their shoes in Zohran Mamdani's New York. I taught him how to fit it all in. I taught him the secrets to an efficient life, to getting things done. But I hadn't taught him how to vacation. I thought we were here for work, he said. We are, I said. He looked at me and nodded, resolute. A story in which the assignment is a vacation. Sure. So we headed outside and boarded the golf cart, and I finally faced what this trip portended. Ornithologists cataloged birds heading for extinction. Scientists monitored pathogens that could become the next pandemic. Astronomers tracked asteroids that had a non-zero chance of colliding with Earth, and Ezra was leaving for college, and there was nothing I could do to stop any of it. He suggested that we just drive, so we headed down a road that was varying degrees of paved, passing brightly colored houses that didn't so much have addresses as names. Yellowtail, High Dunes, Sea Breeze, Tahiti High. At nearby every intersection, a pole holding up electrical wires also featured a lineup of directional signs, pointing everywhere from Omaha to Guatemala to Bend, Oregon, with mileage markers that accounted for their distance to Elbow Cay. Visitors put those signs up themselves, all of them painted in different colors. Why do you think they do that? I asked Ezra. I don't know, he said. Maybe just to say we were here. Elbow Cay is an island, part of the Abaco Islands archipelago in the Bahamas, itself a group of roughly 700 rock formations, some of which are places you make sure your boat doesn't graze on your way to some of the other formations, which have homes and hotels and golf courses. Elbow Cay itself is relatively calm, made up of locals and people from usually Florida and the Carolinas who own second homes there. It's only 5 miles long, and according to an only somewhat recent census, there are only around 400 people who live there year-round. There is more to know about it. Its town with a tiny museum, its red and white candy-striped lighthouse with a lamp powered by kerosene instead of electricity and a flashing mechanism that's still hand-wound by a human being. Its history as a place where British loyalists who opposed the American Revolution fled. The catastrophic impact of Hurricane Dorian in 2019, which hit Elbow Cay particularly hard and cost the Bahamas an estimated $3.4 billion in all. I can't tell you more because finding out more would have constituted work, and this was a vacation. A woman driving an actual car slowed down to say hello to us. In fact, everyone on the island said hello to us. People in their tennis pastels and swimwear bopping along in their golf carts, people walking along the side of the road. Ezra loved this and considered it the height of welcome and civility. You got a cart, the woman said. We realized we had met her on the ferry on the way over. Yes, where should we go? Have you been to Tahiti Beach yet? A sore point. We had not been to Tahiti Beach yet, forgivable this trip because we just landed, but the entire reason we chose Elbow Cay was because we had been here not 2 months before for a friend's wedding. That trip fell prey to the typical travel shenanigans being the rule and not the exception lately, and therefore another reason to stay home. And we were able to stay for only 17 hours. arriving on the island about 40 minutes before the wedding, just enough time to rent our golf cart and change our clothes, smear some makeup onto my face, and army crawl breathless over the finish line into the church. If you see nothing else, you have to at least go to Tahiti Beach, the groom told us before we left. There are swings there, he said, right in the sea, and sometimes there's a boat that comes by to sell drinks and food. But there wasn't time for Tahiti Beach then, and the closest we came was staring at the beach forlornly as our ferry motored us back to the dock in time for our delayed again plane. We were already pointed in the right direction, the woman said. Just keep going past what looked like gates and then follow the road to the right. And then you're there. There is no formal parking lot at the beach. You simply can't drive any longer, so you put your car in park and get out. Another thing about Elbow Cay is how long it takes to get used to the lack of bureaucracy there. We got out and started walking along the shore. We looked onto the ocean, and Ezra said, "We don't talk enough about the fact that the world is like 75% water." The ocean is generally a popular place to swim and a sought-after destination, I said, but I'm not sure how surmountable the amount of urine in that thing is, and how big and menacing it is, he said. And the dead people, don't forget the dead people. How many parts per trillion of Osama bin Laden or Titanic victim decay should we really feel comfortable swimming in? Exactly, he said. Exactly, I said. A real thing is that you raise a child to see the world through your eyes, and then the minute you get all the levels right, he's out the door. We were only a few hours into this vacation, and I was already mourning its end. By then, we had seen the swings hundreds of feet into the ocean, and we were walking into the ocean out on the endless sandbar. It was so calm, there were no breakers, no waves, and as we walked for hundreds of feet, it didn't get deeper, so we walked like Jesus toward the swings. I told Ezra that where his grandfather lives on Long Island, people used to say as a way of disparaging people, he thinks he walks on water, but water pronounced with a Long Island accent like water. What do you want to do after this? I asked. Want to go count some chickens before they hatch, he asked. This is his new thing, to avoid answering a question about what to do with a cliché. It tickles me. I can't, I answered. I'm too busy separating the wheat from the chaff. So we decided to go to On the Beach, an open-air bar that is right there on the beach. There had been a sign pointing toward the bar that said, "This way," which made us laugh. I ordered the pina colada, and Ezra ordered something called Passion on the Beach, and we made jokes about being a mother and son having dirty drinks together and sending one another over to a guy on the other side of the bar. Will you please send over a Passion on the Beach to the gentleman over there, I said, to Ezra, not the bartender. It's from me and my mother, he said, also just to me. We drove around more and then went to eat lobster tacos and guacamole at a place with an outdoor bar and picnic benches. A rooster walked right by us, making his sound, and Ezra wondered where, speaking of cliches, it happened that we began to associate roosters with morning when actually they crow all day. On vacation, you have conversations that aren't purposeful, ones you just back into that include observations and other dumb things, for what feels the first time in years. We paid the bill, and as we waited all up and down the wooden scaffolding of the bar, we noticed groups of people's names, written in marker, perhaps the same "we were here" instinct that the signposts point to. Maybe after this, we could go keep up with the Joneses, he said. And we laughed more loosely than we did before the drink and got back into the golf cart and headed back to the hotel, to our little villa. The day now over, and I wondered if this was what vacation was. Outside my window, the sun had already moved on, swallowed up by the next group of people who needed to wake up. And I felt a profound loss, as if it was another missed opportunity, a thing you can never hold on to. Maybe that's why people mark their names and hometowns on this place, because once you leave, you will need proof that you were actually here in the first place. What is the goal of vacation? Is it enjoying the place? Is it seeing everything? Is it the breathless running from moment to walking tour to site in order to take the measure of a place? Is that even how you take the measure of a place? You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Magazine on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. I'm skeptical of the version of vacation that gets marketed to me, the version I encounter the most when I visit Las Vegas or Miami or Los Angeles on work trips. It goes like this. Beneath my skin is supposedly a version of me that is so tired of civilized living and needs to break out and dress in nearly nothing and eat nearly everything and watch people be naked and get so drunk that you'd have to replace my plasma with, I don't know, plasma, a version of me that is a caged animal barely holding it together until a real vacation comes along to let it out. I don't know if those people really exist, the kind that can only hold it together on a day-to-day basis, knowing that a long weekend full of mojitos and strip clubs awaits. Me, I'm a real regular kind of gal. I'm most comfortable with the predictability of a workday. I love a Wednesday. I don't even like the phrase, thank God it's Friday. And what is a vacation anyway? Who says I am supposed to prefer these things? Lounge chairs, umbrellas and drinks, massages, musicated music re-recorded by laconically uninvested singers that gets piped into a pool area or hotel, music that reminds me of music I've heard but is stripped of its emotion and soul to my life. Who says that a preferred state of being is one in which all movement stops and I can hear my spiraling thoughts even louder? Only now I hate myself because of the bucolic environment I'm in. If I'm honest, our lack of real vacations wasn't just about time or money, it was also about me. The few times we did go on trips with no agenda, I would become paralyzed. How exactly is one supposed to be at a place when one is so unaccustomed to just being in the first place? And there was that part of me that worried that on a real vacation, if I did lie on some sunny chase, if I did just yield to a sparkling body of water, if I finally stopped, I wouldn't know how to begin again. Do you see how, if you think like this, that even the notion of vacation can lead to your collapse? The next day was Saturday, and the weather wasn't great. Once you're on vacation, nearly all you can think or talk about is the weather. It was in the 70s but windy, and while I waited for Ezra to wake up, I read a new book on an Adirondack chair overlooking the small beach in front of my hotel. At breakfast, we ate fruit as if we'd just discovered fruit for the first time. We hired a captain to boat us around for half a day, a young man named S.J., whom we were introduced to over breakfast by another fellow who worked at the hotel. S.J. grew up here. He grew up on boats. When he was a child, his parents gave him a little dinghy that he used to hop from island to island. Now, in addition to running his family's golf cart rental business on the island, he has this boat, a 23-foot Hydrosports, which is great, but he believes there's still work to be done on it. He wants to redo the seats and replace the overhang for a little more coverage. You know what BOAT stands for, he asks us. We don't. Break out another 1,000. Deeper into the ocean, S.J. gave us snorkeling gear, the flippers barely able to fit over our giant American feet. We were to plunge off the side of the boat. Like I said, we're a little afraid of things, Ezra and me. Just being on a boat was tripping the wires of my exquisite combination of claustrophobia and agoraphobia. But we were on vacation, and on vacation you count to 3, and without any false starts, you slip off the boat and into the water, which was cold for the Bahamas but warm for most places. In addition to the decomposition taking place in the ocean, Ezra and I were in general agreement that what lay beneath the water was none of our business. Let the ocean be the ocean. Let it be a frightening ecosystem of Darwinism. Let the food chain do what it needs to do. It was none of our business. I'm struggling to say anything new about what we found at the reef. These tropical fish that just swam around in schools unafraid of us. On vacation, you succumb to cliché in a way you previously allowed yourself to believe you were better than, and you find that the best description of things are not the poetic but the practical. So I'll just say, some of them were translucent, some of them striped. See, Ezra saw a barracuda. It's easier to talk about what it felt like down there, which was quite a revelation. Quiet, a synthesis with the world and nature I don't have. A question about why I make a big deal over everything. Then a wordlessness. Yes. Perhaps my entire triumph of the whole trip was a 10-minute period of wordlessness as I followed a sea turtle as if in a trance. Maybe what I'll say is this. On vacation, you stop trying so hard to describe things. Is this really a vacation if you're writing about it? Ezra asked. Here it was. He was finally asking the question I had avoided, even as the editors who assigned me this story worried that the true answer was something none of us wanted to face, which is that I am either a broken person or a complete grifter. So I obfuscated. What should we do now? I asked him. It was Sunday, and we had just learned that on Sunday everything's closed. Not in the way that we say things are closed in America, which means actually just sometimes they close a little early. Nothing was open. The lighthouse, the museum, most of the restaurants, the ice cream shop, the handful of boutiques. The weather was worse too, a muscular wind that blew our hair around. We'd woken up to puddles on our little porch, and everyone at breakfast found the conditions foreboding. Let's cry over spilt milk, I suggested. How about we bark up the wrong tree instead? So we returned to Tahiti Beach, a middle finger to our last visit to the island, which saw us there not once. Now, old hats at this, we settled in. Here is what it's like to be on vacation. On vacation, instead of having directed conversations, you can have ones of happenstance, backing into things instead of being purposeful about your communication. On vacation, you take turns saying a certain phrase in a different accent and try to make the other person guess the accent you were going for, and always be wrong. On vacation, you sit back in the sand, and for what seems like the first time in forever, you upward tilt your head that has ossified in its downward position. The convex nature of the sky makes it feel unending. The night before, there was something about the volume of stars, how it went forever, that scared us but also dazzled and comforted us. In the daytime, on vacation, you look up at the clouds. Thunder rumbled in the distance. On vacation, particularly here, there is so little to do on this island that the only available metaphors are from nature. Nonetheless, the thunder was far away for now, and so we stayed looking at the sky. Look at the clouds, I said. You forget. The last time I thought about clouds was in a meditation class I took, where I was asked to picture intrusive thoughts as clouds. But these clouds, they were the real thing. I was closing my eyes in picture clouds when they were always right up there. There has to be a connection there, right? That has to be a breadcrumb as to how my life became so harried. I hadn't interacted with clouds in so long. After a moment, I continued. Do you see the layers? Do you see a full set of clouds that are stationary behind the clouds that are moving by? The ones in the back are called cirrus, I explained to him, and the ones moving are called altocumulus, I think. I looked over at Ezra. I hadn't taught him about clouds. But worse, I hadn't taught him about looking up. I hadn't taught him about just sitting there. I had taught him to be so productive, to make every moment count. And besides, how could I teach him something I didn't understand myself, 50 years old and asking questions about how to be on vacation? Here I was, a parent for 18 years, and now I was looking at clouds that I was probably definitely misnaming, and I didn't think I taught him anything at all. Did I use my time with him well? Did I teach him enough of what I wanted him to know? Can he empty a vacuum cleaner? Can he figure out how to get home without his phone or a means of paying? Did he see the third Godfather movie yet? Did he see the second Before Sunrise movie yet? Does he know to take cabs and not Ubers because of the fragile city economy? Does he know not to buy sushi on Sundays? Does he know about the secret parking spot on Houston Street? Does he know how to stand up for a pregnant woman on the subway? Does he know to walk toward the edge of the sidewalk when it's dark and deserted at night in the city? This was it. Ezra was leaving. Everyone kept saying it went so fast, but I can account for every day, and I have to tell you, it did not go fast. There was always a basketball game to be at and a parent-teacher conference to drive to, and a carpool to coordinate and a form to fill out. And my husband and I teamed up and divided the conquered and signed all the permission slips and made the appointments and got it all done, but in the ugliest, messiest way possible. There were 100 decisions to make every day, and there was always a question of priorities and having to name them and choose them, which felt so unfair, like every day you had to issue a referendum against yourself. We walked down the shore back to the cart. We passed a seashell, and he laughed and reminded me of a joke we love about actually the seashore being the worst place to sell seashells, and we walked away, me a few feet behind Ezra, as he started saying the phrase, "Thank ye kindly," and asked me to guess which accent he was doing. I guessed Australian, then Irish, but was wrong both times. That's what you do on vacation. That night after dinner, we watched the sky as the sun set, and the moon revealed itself in all its patience along with the stars, which had been there the whole time, waiting for me to come around. I did, at least that night I did, and then in a moment of grace for myself, I wrote this all down, and not because vacation was a job this time, but just to say we were here. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 22nd issue of the New York Times Magazine. Your reader has been Evelyn. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the USA Today. Following that at 2 o'clock, we have episode number 11 of Buckeye by Patrick Ryan. Stay with us for these readings and more.
The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low